My name is Jonah Jonathan, and welcome once again to the Jazz Musician's Voice. Today I'm really pleased to speak with jazz guitarist Paul Meyers, someone I've known for many years through William Paterson University, a great guitarist, a world-renowned guitarist in jazz and also in Brazilian music. And he's just a really knowledgeable guy and a great educator. He's played all over the world, and he's got some great things to share with us. So thanks for watching. Please subscribe, share this with your friends, and stay tuned because we have a lot more future interviews coming.
So ladies and gentlemen, today I'm pleased to speak with jazz guitarist Paul Meyers, world-renowned guitarist. I've known Paul for many years. He's a teacher of mine at William Paterson University. Excellent guitarist and knowledgeable guy. So, Paul, let's start with your early background. Where are you originally from, and how did you first become involved in music?
Well, I'm originally from. I was born. My family. We lived in New York City on the Upper West Side, and there was always music around because both of my parents were musicians. My father played trombone, and my mother was a singer, and my mother's still alive. She ended up teaching voice for many years, and she also was a good piano player, and so there was always music around, you know. And my brother and I have a younger brother. We had it around and took piano lessons when that was the kind of the rule in the house. We had to take piano lessons when we were young. It was one of the things that they had us do. And not to say, we were pretty young when we did that. Neither of us really were thinking about playing music or playing the piano or practicing a lot or anything. But I think that probably made us both very attuned to music at a young age. And so that's where we started out.
Well, I mean, that's great. Yeah, to have that foundation in piano really helps in the future, you know. And you also played some violin, I guess, and classical guitar, right? You know, that was your main focus.
Yeah. Right, you know about that. Yeah, well, when we moved out of the city, before I got into second grade, so before I was 7 years old, we moved to Connecticut, and outside of Hartford, because my father got a job teaching at Hart College and playing in the Hartford Symphony Orchestra. And anyway, so we moved there, and around, I think it was fourth grade, it was time to sign up for band or orchestra. And I actually wanted to play drums at that time, but my father kind of talked me into, like, here, let's play violin. He had a violin that he played when he was a kid in the closet, and he took it out and he just kind of handed it to me and said, here, why don't you do this? So I did that for a couple of years. It wasn't what I wanted to do, so I didn't really work at it very hard, and it never got to be very good at it. But then I started playing guitar. I found a guitar, and then we moved again because my parents split up, but my mother got a teaching job teaching voice in Potsdam, New York, in upstate New York at the big music school. So we moved up there. I was 12 years old, and that's when I started playing guitar. And I loved that. And, was playing. I started taking guitar lessons. I guess they were just beginning guitar lessons, but it was from the teacher at the college, who was a great musician, a guy named Dick Steffen. At first it was just half-hour lessons, just really, very beginning. But eventually it led to a little bit of classical guitar, and then a little more classical guitar. At the same time, I was playing in rock bands and blues and everything with my friends in junior high school and high school. And so that's how that all started.
Well, to have that classical guitar foundation is really like the best for a guitar player. You know, I see some of these like virtuoso rock guitarists, they all learn classical guitar because that is part of the the virtuosity of the instrument, you know.
Yeah, it is a beautiful thing, and of course that's that's where the guitar came from Spain, like 500 years of tradition of classical guitar. Well, and flamenco guitar too, which I don't do that. But the classical tradition is very old and very rich, and there's so much. I'm glad that as I do I'm not a great classical guitar player because that's not what I focused on. But you know, you learn a lot from just the little Bach pieces and the little things that you practice and work on, and it's very complete music. It's almost like it's similar to piano. You hear the melody and the harmony and everything all in one package. So it kind of teaches you that the guitar can do a lot. Just those six strings.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, then yeah, like you said, you attended the State University at Potsdam, and later Eastman School of Music, and then the New England Conservatory. Man, those are some pretty intensive schools. Talk about some of your school years and the people that you study with during those times.
Yeah, well, at Potsdam, I had started to I'd gotten very interested in jazz and fell in love with jazz music late in high school, around my senior year. And of course, the music college was right in the same town, and my mother taught there, and I knew the guitar teacher. I knew people there. And actually, Potsdam was a place that a lot of musicians from Long Island and New York City came up to study because it was a big music department and it was a good place. So, like Gary Smulyan, I don't know if you're familiar with Gary.
Yeah, Gary, yeah.
Yeah, we were freshmen there at the same time. He was an alto player then. He was great even then. And well, some other Mitch Foreman was also there for a while, great piano player. And Russ Kassoff and Glenn Drews, a whole lot of people, not some of them not necessarily big names, but a lot of good music, great players. There wasn't an official jazz program there, but there was a lot of jazz. There was two big bands going on. I played in one of the big bands, and there was lots of gigs around town at that time too. It was pretty cool. There's two colleges in the town. Clarkson is a big engineering school. So there's a lot of young people. And the bars downtown, the little bars, at that time when I was in school, I was very fortunate because a lot of them had jazz. They liked having jazz music in the clubs, in the bars. I call them clubs. They weren't jazz clubs, but they had live music and they had a lot of jazz. And I was one of the only was only a couple of good jazz guitar players in town, so I got to play a lot and got to go out gigging with. I was in a couple of different groups that we got to play out. So what you know how it is when you're first starting out, it's very important to get on the bandstand.
Yeah, I have that experience.
Yeah, have that experience and find out what you need to work on and what things are working and what things aren't working, what you need to go home and woodshed the next day and the next week, the next month. And that was very, very valuable. So I was there 2 years, and then I felt like a kind of a big fish in a small pond after a while, and I felt like I needed to get somewhere else. But I ended up going to Rochester, taking a year off from school, and I went to Rochester, which is a much bigger. It's not a huge city, but it's much bigger than Potsdam. And Eastman is there. And I was just practicing a lot that year. I just really I knew what I wanted to work on, and I was doing some gigs and teaching a little bit. I got a job at a couple different music stores. I was teaching guitar lessons, and so I was supporting myself. And I would still go back to Potsdam and play gigs because it was only 4 hours away. And that last summer, before I left, I had auditioned at New England Conservatory, and I was accepted. And that last summer before I left for New England, I also took some classes at Eastman. So I took a great class with the amazing teacher, educator, Bill Dobbins. And then I also took guitar lessons from Gene Bertoncini, who is still teaching and still playing. He and I are the two jazz guitar teachers at William Paterson for the last quite a few years. I don't know if he was there when you were there.
Yeah, Gene was there. He's great. I had an ensemble with him. I really liked he's a really humble guy, and he has a very laid back, way of leading the ensemble, but really has played with some of the greatest people in the music,
Yeah, that was a wonderful thing for me to meet him. And then I went to New England Conservatory. I was my undergrad years, my final 2 years were there in Boston. And during those 2 years, the guitar teacher, first it was Barry Galbraith when I first got there. And then he had been teaching there for a while. He stopped teaching there halfway through my first year. So I had one semester with him. He was great. And they got Chuck, and all these guys were commuting from the city, from New York. So Barry would come up and teach for a day or two, all the students. And then they got Chuck Wayne, who was a great kind of a bebop guitar player, like well known for, in that kind of way. Had him for a semester, then he stopped doing it. I think he didn't like commuting. And then they hired Gene. So I had Gene Bertoncini again for my final year as a student when I was a senior. I had a whole year with Gene. And it was interesting because they all had different approaches to teaching. I learned different things from all of them. Barry's thing was one of the things that he really felt was important for all his students is he felt they had to be good readers. And of course you worked on everything, but he had a lot of things for you to read. He wanted to make sure your reading was ready. So you'd be ready to go into the studio or get music put in front of you. And Chuck Wayne's thing was more like he had a whole systematic approach to scales and arpeggios and chords and inversions. And he was the first person that there's a thing called the drop two inversions for the guitar, where there's all different ways to play inversions of chords all over the neck. That I remember feeling like, well, that was something that really opened up the guitar for me. And, and they were all great to hang out and play with. And then Gene's thing was more exploratory and like, here, think about this, or here's a possibility, or, was really kind of, in a way, the most creative, the kind of pushed you and inspired you to think a little bit outside the box, maybe. So they were all, it was a good time. Then I stayed one more year in Boston and just lived there and was practicing and gigging, and that's where I met the great bass player Santi Debriano. He was also living there, and we played together on a gig, and then we started hanging out and playing together, and we became good friends, and we've done a lot more since I came to New York,
Yeah, Boston, believe it or not, like a lot of the guys I've interviewed, that period of the 70s and 80s in Boston, a lot of great musicians were through there because of like the Berklee School. And, I was talking with Joe Lovano about being there, as well as like, Mulgrew Miller was there and learning with James Williams and all of that, that scene. It's great, but then, you moved to New York in 1980. What was the music scene like at that time for you in New York? And like, what were some of the venues you were frequenting and all of that?
Yeah. Well, when I first got there, I was still, I was only just a year out of college. And so I still felt, I felt like I had gotten, pretty good, but still like, this is New York now, this is where the heaviest of the heavies are. And so I moved with a buddy of mine. He was a bass player named Dick Sarpola, who's still in New York. And we got a place in Brooklyn, and we lived there, and we bought a used set of drums and put them in our living room, and we started having sessions all the time. We got to meet a lot of people that way. We would invite people over, because we didn't really know too many people. But I started just getting little gigs here and there. And some of them were local, like gigs in Brooklyn. Actually, more that was kind of the beginning, and also meeting some great players in Brooklyn. There was a drummer that we met, Dick Sarpelin and I, the bass player, named Mark Plank from Louisville, Kentucky, where a lot of good musicians came up from there too, including the famous guitar player Jimmy Rainey from there. And we started playing with him a lot, the three of us, and we became a trio, you know. And we actually made a record. That's the first recording that I ever did. That's a record called Blues for Henry Miller. That was back in the days before CDs. So my first record is actually a record.
Yeah,
And it's still available if anybody's interested. It made available as a digital download, or you can find it on, I don't know, I guess somewhere on the net. And I learned a lot playing with him and with everybody. It just pushes you when you put yourself in an environment, you know how it is, with great players all around you all the time. It just makes you want to go home and just like get better and keep practicing and learning more and sounding better. But I remember going out to clubs a lot to hear a lot of great music. And of course I've continued to do that to this. I guess I probably, when I'm over time, I don't hang out as much as I used to. I spend more time, you know, not quite going out all like however many nights a week to go hear everybody. But yeah, it's heard Sonny Rollins, heard McCoy Tyner, heard, you know, I'm going over the years, not all at the same time, but heard Mulgrew many times with Woody Shaw, and then later with Wingspan and his own groups, and many great guitar players. Heard what's his name, Doc Cheatham, before he passed. He was in his 90s and he was still great. That was wonderful. You know, you hear all different, like Doc Cheatham was very old style, you know. And then I heard very, you know, Joanne Brackeen and McCoy, and very modern things, and then very straight ahead things. And also then I started to get, after a certain point, I started to get interested in Brazilian music, Brazilian jazz. And I started to meet people. There still is a great community of Brazilian jazz musicians in New York. And got interested in that too.
yeah. I mean, man, when you talk about like, in some ways, as a young person, I could be really envious of the time that like you were in New York, because like there's still some of those guys who are like the first or second generation of jazz who are still alive, and now we're coming to times when there's coronavirus and there's things and nobody can go out, and it's a little harder to find and learn about that music. You kind of have to go through different channels, but also not going out as much. There's more to life than just music. There's other aspects, and every person I talk to in this interview series has different hobbies and different stuff. I was just talking with Ralph Peterson, and didn't know, you know, he's a black belt in karate, you know, 5-time black belt in karate, you know. So yeah, there's definitely different parts of living a whole life, having different hobbies and different things that make you a better musician as well. But wow, as a sideman over the years, you work with such names like Red Rodney, Gary Burton, Kenny Barron, Clare Fischer, Sonny Fortune, Wynton Marsalis, Kenny Werner, Ron Carter, Eliane Elias, Rufus Reid, Geri Allen, the Woody Herman Orchestra, Jon Hendricks, Andy Bey. I mean, so many names. Talk about what it takes to be a guitar player and such a successful sideman with all these musicians, you know, and some stories, you know.
Sure. Well, you know, that list I have worked with all those people. Some of them I worked with only a couple of times, a handful of times. Some of them I worked like Jon Hendricks, I worked with for 23 years. Andy Bey I worked with for 9 years. Gary Burton I worked with just kind of a handful of times, but what happened with him was I had written a tune. Um, this was in the mid 80s. I'd written a tune that I called Panama. And it's sort of a long story, but through a great and amazing vibes player that I had started playing with another group. I had started playing with a quartet with a vibes player named Joe Locke, who's just amazing, an amazing musician, and a drummer actually who I had met from back in Boston, who was at school at Berkeley, Tim Horner, a great drummer, and a bass player named Kip Reed. We started playing together, and I was writing tunes. I was getting at that time, actually, I was playing a little more. I was experimenting, playing. It just felt like what I wanted to see where it would go. Playing a little more electric, almost a little more. I don't know, fusion is the right word, but a little more towards that anyway. And we started doing things together, and we made a recording together that it was never made into a record, but it was like a demo thing with some of my tunes and some of Joe's tunes on it, Joe Locke's. And Joe had met Gary Burton. Gary was playing in New York, and Joe went down to hear him and introduce himself. And he gave him a tape, a recording of some tunes that he was playing on to show Gary what he played like, to introduce himself. And then Gary contacted him afterwards and told him, he said, you sound great. You're a fantastic player. And I wish you a lot of luck in your career. And he said, by the way, there's a tune on there I really like, that tune Panama. And who wrote that? And so Joe told him about me. And then he said, well, and then Joe contacted me. Joe called me up or wrote to me. I guess he called me, said, Gary wants your tune. So I sent, he gave me the address. I sent Gary the tune, and then I just forgot about it, And then about a year later, I got a note from Gary saying he just recorded the tune with Pat Metheny on a record called Reunion. So what had happened, it was Gary and Pat had started playing together again, just for this one recording, actually. But Pat, I don't know if you know, but Pat Metheny started out when he was very young playing in Gary's band. So this was a reunion. Pat, they hadn't played together for 10 years, and then they got together. So they recorded my tune, and then because Gary had made this record, he started playing with a guitar player in his band again. And there was a guy from Europe, a very good guitar player named Wolfgang Molchfield at Berkeley. I think he was a Berkeley student that was doing the gigs, but because of a visa problem, because he didn't have the right visa, he couldn't go on this one gig to Argentina with Gary. So Gary contacted me. I went with him and played with him there and did some clinics for Berkeley. And then there was a few more gigs after that in the States that I did with him, here and there, different festivals.
Wow, so it's quite an honor, get your tune recorded and.
Yeah, it is. It was quite an honor. It's quite a nice surprise, and and I've actually recorded the tune myself with my own group, a group I have called World on a String, and I still love playing that tune. But anyway, so that worked. That's how that happened, and like being a sideman, I guess, and as a bass player, you're often a sideman too. Many of us work a lot as a sideman. A lot of people say your job is to make the band leader sound good, to provide a good support cushion for them, and that. It depends on the gig. It's going to be different. You might play different for one person than you play a little different for another person, for another leader, for another style of music. And I'd always liked the role of accompaniment. And you're exploring different harmonies and chords and ways to play chords and rhythmic feelings and making that work. Even just doing a gig with a singer, there are like there are duo gigs sometimes for guitar and voice. Like a singer will hire a guitar player and just go play in a club or something. And that's actually a very hard thing to do it well. And I worked on that because I enjoyed it. So I guess that probably reflected. That's one of the things that reflected in being able to work with all these people. Um, and of course, just being around, it's partly networking. And people hear you, as you know, they hear you play somewhere and they take your number, or you just never know what connection is going to lead to anything else. And being in the city and being around so much music all the time, sometimes the doors open in that way. And
Yeah. Well, I mean, and as you talk about writing that tune. I mean, you have led many of your own groups as a leader and have released many recordings. So talk about some of these groups and the recordings that you have released over the years.
Okay. Well, I mentioned before that Blues for Henry Miller, that was with the trio that we had together. I think we called it Isotope at the time, but it was a jazz guitar trio. And it's nice to go back after having been around and done everything. When I go back and listen to that, which I did recently because I'm making sure that I'm redoing my website, which should be out. By the way, I should announce that. I think the website should be up and running any day now. It's all redone, and it's coming out real nice, and you can hear a lot of the music and find it on there. I think it will be called paulmeyersguitar.com.
Nice. Yeah.
So anyway, if people want to go, it's not there today, but it might be there as soon as tomorrow. Anyhow, so I was listening to that first recording again, which I did so many years ago. And it's nice when you go back and you feel like, we were good. I was playing good. I mean, I know more now than I did then, but still, I enjoyed listening to it and enjoyed the way I was playing and the way we were playing together. That's a good feeling. So then I had that other group with Joe Locke, that quartet. We didn't make a recording. I wish we had, but we didn't do that at the time. Then I got very involved in Brazilian music, and I made a record with these great Brazilian musicians, Brazil and Company, with a fantastic singer named Vera Mara, and that's partly quartet and partly some guest musicians and partly just duo, the voice and guitar thing. And some other sort of Brazilian jazz Latin fusion records. There's a great trio record with Santi Debriano, the amazing bass player and composer, and a Brazilian drummer named Vanderlei Pereira. We had a trio called Euphoria, and we did a record on the Maple Shade, a CD on the Maple Shade label with some of my originals, some of Santi's originals, and some arrangements. That's a really nice record. Santi and I, then we also did a duo record on that label called Spirit and Samba with a couple of spirituals on that we arranged. Other groups, World on a String. That's a group that I've had for a long time. The full group is a quintet with Donnie McCaslin playing tenor and flute and Elio Alves playing piano, a great Brazilian piano player. And also that has also the same drummer, Vanderlei Pereira, the Brazilian drummer. So that's kind of it's not out and out Brazilian. Some of it is, but some of it's kind of falls in the cracks. It's like you can't pin a name exactly on what is that style. Is it jazz? Is it Latin? Is it Brazilian? Is it what? And that was kind of my intention. Is like one of the things I find interesting in composing is exploring different rhythmic feelings. I mean, I love playing straight ahead, and I'll always love playing straight ahead. But Brazilian. There's so many different Brazilian rhythms, and then just any kind of rhythmic feeling that starts to swing and to groove and to feel good can be something that makes you think and feel and play a little differently, you know. So that's that group, and we continue to play up to this day. And a lot of times, because of the venues and because of the way the things are, that group is just a trio with Vanderlei and a bass player named Leo Traversa, a wonderful electric bass player. And there's some videos of us playing online on YouTube that are really
Yeah, I saw the Jazz Day concert, or the William Paterson concert. That was nice, you know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's up on YouTube.
Okay. And there's some my favorite ones are the ones from Sarah's Wine Bar. There's a place called Sarah's Wine Bar in Connecticut where they do a Jazz Masters series. And there's some really great videos of the trio from there. So if anybody wants to go check that out. So that's a group that I've had, and I'm in some other groups. In fact, there's a group, the same drummer I was talking about, Vanderlei Pereira, a wonderful Brazilian drummer, and we've become very good friends over the years. He plays in my groups, and I also play in his group. He has a group called Blindfold Test, which is a sextet, and he writes and arranges for it. And he just this year, earlier this year, put out the first CD of that group, and it's fantastic. It's called Vanderlei Pereira Blindfold Test. The name of the CD is Vision for Rhythm, and that's a heck of a CD, and a heck of a group to play with. So there was a group, there was an interesting group I played with for a while. I guess, I don't know if it was sidemen, but I wasn't the instigator of the group, but I was an important part of the trio. It was bass, cello, and guitar, called Trio Concertante. And the bass player, it was really his idea. A guy named Dennis James, who is a good jazz player, but one of the best classical bass players on the planet, like a total virtuoso, an amazing bass player. And apparently there's music for bass and cello, classical music that's been arranged or put together or composed. I think there's one piece that was composed for bass and cello called Duo Concertante. And that's where you got the idea. He wanted to do the same kind of thing, but have it be kind of some classical music, some jazz music, and some Brazilian music. So we got together. There's a cellist who also went to NEC, Annabelle Hoffman, great cellist. The three of us got together and we started arranging our own music. And there's a Baroque piece by Couperin. There was some Bartók pieces from the Microcosmos that we arranged for the trio. And then we did some Brazilian things and some jazz things, including a monk tune, Crepuscule with Nelly, we did for the trio. Trying to remember. I know we did Perdido. I think it's on the thing that has a great Oscar Pettiford solo that Oscar Pettiford did on cello. You ever hear that?
You know, Oscar Pettiford, I've got his real book of bass transcriptions that I'm working through. He was an amazing cello player too, and I've got a few young cello students that I'm trying to help out. You know, cello. That relationship is interesting because a lot of times what happens is, like, a great bass player, they'll break their leg or something and they can't stand up straight. So they just tune the cello up and start learning how to play cello in that respect.
Right.
And, you know, Ron Carter also was a cello player before he was a bass player. Yeah. But, you know, when we talk about as a guitarist, I mean, Wow. Yeah. As a classical musician, you're adept. You're adept in Brazilian jazz, playing with some of these real greats. What advice do you have for young guitarists who want to become adept at their instruments and follow kind of in your footsteps? You know, for guitarists watching.
Well, I mean, having a good teacher is good, but it can be very important, very, very helpful. And especially when you're younger, but also just take it upon yourself to self-teach. You know, a lot of transcribe things yourself, learn things by ear, develop your ear so that you can really hear on a high level, as high a level as you can get. And by transcribing, that's a great way to do ear training and also learn vocabulary. And like my own thing when I was a young jazz guitar player was I did a lot of transcribing, especially Wes Montgomery. At that time, there were no good books now there's some good books you can get with Wes's solos written out. But if you write them out yourself, it really trains your ear. Your ear gets much stronger. And at first it was very, very hard to do. But the more I did it, the better it got. And what I also read an article, I thought like, how did Wes get that good? Well, I read an interview with him where he said when he started out, he started learning all the Charlie Christian solos off the records. So I figured, well, if that worked for Wes, maybe I should do the same thing. Find your favorite players and get the recordings and start trying to figure out what they're doing. And it can help to have a teacher with that too. It can make it the process quicker. But if you don't have a teacher, you can still do a lot. And over time, your ear gets so that you hear things much, much quicker than you did at first. At first, it's very, very hard. But that's a great thing to do, and I also advise students to don't box yourself in. Think about, okay, well, for instance, I got into Brazilian music and I played a little classical guitar, so try to use everything that you have. If you play a little classical guitar, great, and maybe that'll be helpful on a gig at some point somewhere. And I got interested in Brazilian music just because I liked the music. And so I started getting the recordings and trying to figure out what they're doing, Baden Powell was the first great Brazilian guitar player. I heard some recordings and I thought, oh, this is great, Let me see if I can figure out I started with some of the simpler things, that what he's doing. And João Gilberto, the great bossa nova giant, well, how's he comping? What are those rhythms and those chords that he's using when he comps? And try to get that feeling. And then when you get it, that can open a door to gigs, in that world. And so whatever you're interested in, it might be a certain style of guitar playing that you just like, it might not be jazz, but it's still music. It's all music. I also got into Bela Bartok's music, and I eventually tried working out some of the Microcosmos on guitar, and I ended up recording those on my first solo guitar CD. But I don't play them anymore; they're too hard.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're talking more along the lines of teaching. As an educator, you have taught extensively at William Paterson University as well as SUNY Purchase and other master classes. Talk a little bit about your time as an educator and your thoughts on jazz education in the school systems.
Yeah. Well, I think it's the environment at William Paterson. I'm also at Purchase now. I just started there a year ago, and at New Jersey City University, and all the programs. The idea is to really, it's good for. I in a way, I wish I had that experience. I wish I had the opportunity to go to a place like William Paterson when I was young, because where I was good, but I would have gotten even more input from a place like that. I would have been around people like Harold Mayburn or James Williams, you know, or Gene Bertoncini all the time, and other students that are all around those people all the time and in groups. So I think that I'm able to, the longer I teach, the more I feel like I'm able to give things to students that are just the right thing to help them push up to a little bit to another level, um, in a good way, you know, to like get a light bulb, to make a connection, make the light bulb go off and say, oh, that's how that works. Oh, I see. I need to work on that, you know. And that's really what it's about, is I'm trying to help them. You know, it's hard with jazz because you're not trying to teach, here's the way to play. There's not one way to play. I mean, in classical music, I'm sure it's not an easy thing to teach either, but it is like, okay, if here's this Beethoven sonata, these are the notes. Those are the notes you're going to play. But with jazz, the big part of jazz that takes the longest, there's a lot of things that you have to learn, scales and arpeggios and harmony and be able to play in all keys and read and all that. But there's also the improvisation part. And the improvisation part is the freedom part, you know. That's the part where there's no rule that says you're not. In fact, it would be crazy if everybody was supposed to play the same. That would be nuts, you know. Everybody's got to find their own way, even if it's a blues or just a simple standard tune. And you're all using sort of, probably, at least to start out with, pretty much the same basic vocabulary, the same scales, same chords, or the same type of chords. But there's so many different things you can do with it.
Yeah.
So it's more like kind of saying, kind of giving some historical background, like, well, here's something that so-and-so thought about, try this. You know, maybe learn that solo, like an Oscar Pettiford solo, and then think about that. Try to get inside their mind, you know, of the great player,
Yeah.
and try to feel like what they're doing and how to teach that. That's a big part of it. And the more diversified, you know, the more different kinds of things. Well, here's maybe somebody from the early times, and here's somebody from a bebop era, and then here's somebody from a more modern, like a Joe Henderson or a Pat Metheny or a Schofield, or, you know, they all have something to offer, and that the student can soak up.
Well, you know, when you talk about William Paterson, I mean, I think I was like one of the last generation of students who were there where there wasn't such thing as an iPhone yet, you know? And when you go there, you be engrossed in music. You go in that building, there's either, you know, Harold Mayburn might be in one room and Mulgrew Miller's in another room.
Right.
And these guys, in fact, are so humble, you know. Mulgrew, I remember he would actually put his foot on the mute pedal when he's playing something because he's like, oh no, I still got something to work out, you know. And something you learn as you get older, you learn that there's so much more to learn about your instruments. It's a lifelong process. Whereas like so many of the young kids come in and they have this idea, oh, I'm like a virtuoso with my instrument. But as you get older, you learn that there's just so much more to learn. There's like, you know, times are changing, especially with like social media and the internet and all of that. I was just glad to meet some of those guys who weren't part of that era. You know, Mulgrew just would say like, a recording session is just a documentation of how you sound on the bandstand.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas now people are making recordings just to promote themselves. It's a whole different thing. But you know, now we have the coronavirus, and we were talking off camera. You're actually upstate New York right now. So talk about how you've been affected by the coronavirus and especially with teaching and gigs and everything, you know.
Oh, well, you sure. I mean, this pandemic is a terrible, terrible thing. in so many ways, and we could spend a whole afternoon talking about that. But as far as, you know, it's affected musicians, it's been very hard on musicians because for the most part, with a few little exceptions, there's no gigs now. You know, maybe there might be something outside here, or you know, or people are trying to do virtual gigs. Well, I don't know about that, but for the most part, no gigs. And teaching, well, that is one thing that I'm thankful for the internet, because it does allow me to teach, to stay up here. Normally I would be back in Jersey, you know, driving to the schools and teaching everybody in person, which is great. You know, that's the way it should be. But the technology now does allow us to say, okay, well, if we can't safely get together, we can at least do this, sort of like what we're doing now. And, you know, I can still talk about the same information and demonstrate it and play it, and I can hear the student play it, and I can hear the student play it with a metronome or with a play along. The only thing we can't do is play at the same time, because it's not quite in sync, which that's unfortunate. But most of my teaching, I tend to teach, where we play at the same time, but I like to try to teach, like, what is the student not hearing yet, or not able to use or understanding yet, you know, that they need to think about, like whether it's a certain kind of harmonic thing or rhythmic thing, or they need work on so even when it's in person, a lot of the stuff is like, here, play this, and how does this work, or what are you doing with this chord? You know, there's a lot of thought process. So all that can still work. And actually, one cool thing about using Zoom is you can record the lessons. So you can go over a lot of things, and then the student doesn't have to remember them all. They can, like, you know, go back and watch it again.
Yeah. I wish I had been able to do that when I was studying with like Ron or Mulgrew, you know, back then, because man, that would be worth something to me today. I mean, I remember them. I have notes of stuff, but I don't have video recordings, you know.
It's not the same, you know, when you actually hear it and watch the person play it and talk. Sometimes things take a while to sink in, you know. It's just like, you know how it is with music when you listen to music. Like for instance, I'll give you, for me, when I started listening to jazz, I mean, I started like, I'm going to listen to everything, you know, I want to listen to everybody. And there would be certain people that I would really like more than others. Like, oh, this I love this way this person plays. And then something else would be like, well, that's okay, but it's not really. And I remember at first, when I first listened to Thelonious Monk, it was like, well, yeah, I guess it's good. It's not bad, but I just don't really get it, you know? And then it was a few years later, you know, and I would always listen to stuff anyway. I would still hear him again. I started hearing it again, and over time, it started to sound, wait a minute, you know what? This sounds really good. And let me try to figure out what is going on here. And I started to really listen to it and try to figure out, like, the way he plays chords. I tried to figure out similar kind of chord voicings on the guitar and learning those tunes. But, you know, sometimes you're just not quite ready for something, and then a little later on, it like, oh, it clicks, you know. Same thing with teaching and learning. Like, the things that a teacher might tell you at one point, if you have the chance to think about it or watch it again later, you might appreciate it even more. It might on a deeper level.
Musical tastes change over the years too. One of the things that I'm doing right now, I'm learning all this like electric bass stuff with like James Jamerson and you know, all the Bernard Edwards, all that stuff in the 60s and 70s. One of the most useful tools I have now is like Audacity. I can actually slow something down in the same tempo. I mean, change the tempo, but not the pitch. Right. So I can slow it down by like 30% and really try to work something out and get myself to a place where I can actually play it. I suppose back in the day, people had tape recorders where they could do similar things, but the technology is there now where it becomes a lot easier. you know.
Yes, that's true. And it's reflected sometimes I see it in the students sometimes at Paterson. I've seen it over the years with the technology that, if somebody who's got some talent and who starts listening to, their favorite players when they're like 12 years old on the internet, they can they can go on constant, like every day they can go and hear like all their favorite players, and they can slow it down. They come in, some of the freshmen come in now, they're like, it's pretty amazing the tools that people have available now.
Yeah.
If you use it wisely, I think it's great. I think some people think, oh, I got all these tools, so it has to be used wisely like anything else.
Yes.
But,
all of the challenge, the challenge is now is like time management, finding time for being healthy in all aspects of your life, time for practice, time for rest, time for meditation. All those things are part of the whole of life. And unfortunately, you see this with many musicians. I see that, like, look what happened to Mulgrew Miller, such a great musician, but there's so many demands on his time that ultimately end up being unhealthy on his health, and you see this now, like this coronavirus epidemic. Some musicians are using it to their advantage to get healthy and take a step back, like such as yourself up in Potsdam, getting that nature as well. That's certainly a part of the balance, because there are some great musicians who are living into their 90s, and then there are some that passed away far too soon.
That's right.
So that's the balance. But before we finish up, I don't know, like, since you're on camera, if you want to play something for us. I don't know if your guitar is around. Let's see if we could include that.
Actually, this is something I was just working on. You can hear that okay?
Yeah, sounds great.
So this is a reharmonization that actually a student, a very talented student at Purchase who just graduated, his name is Sean Bauer, he reharmonized the tune, the standard All the Things You Are, in a real nice way. And I remember when he came into his lesson, this was last year, and he was showing it to me. I said, boy, that's really nice, kind of puts a new whole thing on the tune. And I asked him I said, let's write it down. He didn't even have it written down. We wrote down the chords, and I changed one or two of them. I said, I like for myself, But I told him, I said, I've been playing this. I called him up recently. I've been playing this it feels interesting. It kind of makes the tune very refreshing in a way. So I'll just play through the tune. It sounds like this. Oh, sorry. So, and
Nice,
I'm working
nice.
on improvising on it too, but
Yeah,
that's taking a little time because it's totally different.
yeah, yeah. That's
It's nice,
cool.
right?
Yeah, it's nice. It's a different harmonization. And so, yeah. What are the future projects upcoming? Uh, you have anything going on?
You know,
Takes you.
just really right now because of this thing, it's so day to day. I mean, I always have a lot of ideas of things I'd like to do, like recording ideas and projects and playing projects and just things I'd like to learn. Like, oh, I'd like to here's some tune, or I'd like to write some more. I've been playing with some ideas, writing, but I don't have anything specific because this time is so crazy with the virus. Um, I don't feel like I can plan, well, it'll be gone at this date. Hopefully it'll be gone over soon. Maybe they'll have vaccines, and sounds like they're making some progress on that. And by sometime early next year or by the middle of next year, maybe we'll be cool. I really
Yeah,
hope
yeah,
so.
yeah,
But mostly I'm focusing on my teaching. Feel very fortunate that I can continue to work with young people who are learning the music just like we did, um, help them, and so that's some of my time. And then I try to practice every day, just practice, work on new things, work on old things, um, do a little writing if I can. I try to do that every day. Try to get outside and walk or do something every day, get some exercise. I was swimming up here until until the water got too cold in the river out here.
yeah. It's getting chilly. It's raining over here. I'm not sure where
Yeah,
it is over there. It's a rainy
yeah, it was
day
raining
today.
this morning here
Yeah.
too. Yeah.
Uh,
So, but we like Lisa likes to walk. My wife likes to walk too. So we try to get out and do a really good walk every day, at least that. And so that's I don't have a specific project coming right at the moment. Well, my website, that's been a project. That's going to be nice to have that out there because um, it helped me think about all the music I've done, like you mentioned, all the recordings I've done, and I really wanted to have all the CDs I've done and recordings on there in a real clear way, and you're going to be able to hear a track from every CD on the website too. So that's taken some time putting that all together and making sure some of that music wasn't even available even on Spotify or on anything, CD Baby, or you couldn't even hear it. So I've been working on getting that access so people can hear it, and if they want to get it, they can download it or something like that too.
yeah, that'll be great. We'll try to include that link when it comes out. On the video.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah. Well, Paul, thanks for speaking with us, and keep doing what you're doing. Keep playing. This coronavirus will be done at some
Yeah,
point, and music will make its coming back. It
that's
will.
right. Well, you take care of yourself too, Jonathan. I really appreciate the opportunity to do this with you, and same to you. Keep strong and stay safe. Keep the music strong, and hope to see you in person before too long.